For more on today's top political stories, I want to bring in Robert Costa and Jennifer Haberkorn. Robert is CBS News chief election and campaign correspondent, and Jennifer is a congressional reporter for the Los Angeles Times. It is good to have you both. And Robert, if I may, for just a moment, because I understand this is your inaugural appearance on Red and Blue.
It is.
Welcome. It is really great to have you. We've got a lot to talk about, but it's nice to see you.
Great to be with you. Such an honor to be here.
Well, it's really great to have you, and we do have a lot to discuss. First of all, we're starting to see some tensions emerge between Democrats and Republicans when it comes to Ukraine. What can you tell us about that?
I've been making calls this afternoon, and it's pretty intriguing what's happening inside the Republican Party, because you had Senator Jim Risch of Idaho, the ranking member on the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He came out today saying that the GOP should move forward with its own sanctions bill. So that means that Senator Risch and Senator Menendez, the chairman of the Foreign Relations Committee, a Democrat, are somewhat breaking right now on those bipartisan negotiations. So on one side, the GOP is being pretty hawkish when it comes to Ukraine, but you still have those like Senator Rand Paul of Kentucky, Senator Ron Johnson of Wisconsin, who are very much not hawkish when it comes to Russia. But this is all about the political positioning against the Biden administration, just two different approaches.
That's so interesting. And Jennifer, you know, time was really supposed to be of the essence when it came to getting a sanctions package together. That's the whole point of deterrence, is you've got to show the other side what you're trying to deter them with. So why can't the two parties get past these sticking points when it comes to this sanctions package?
You know, the parties were pretty aligned for a couple of days. They were working together. It seems like they were heading toward an agreement. Both sides wanted to do a sanctions bill. But as Robert mentioned, you know, we saw this rift emerge pretty much today, in which the parties, you know, declared that a deal was not going to be plausible. You know, the things that really divided them were the timing, when sanctions would go into effect if Russia invaded, as well as how to deal with Nord Stream 2. That's the massive pipeline project, which will send natural gas to Russia, from Russia to Germany, and frankly to much of the rest of Europe. And so the parties were not able to come together on that. And now we're seeing Republicans step up their rhetoric against the Biden administration. I think we're going to see in the coming days them continue to do so, to try to undermine the Biden administration, at least in regards to how severely they feel the president is standing up to Putin.
Robert, you know, pocketbook issues tend to supersede foreign affairs when it comes to midterm elections. Do you think that Ukraine will end up being a big factor in November's races?
We see that House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy, he's telling members privately, based on my reporting, that Republicans should somewhat talk about foreign policy in terms of attacking the Biden administration on how they're handling Russia and Ukraine and how they handled the withdrawal from Afghanistan. But most of my House Republican sources are not going to lead with foreign policy. They're going to lead on the economy. But they also know there are still some variables out there, like President Biden's Supreme Court pick and the Supreme Court decision likely this summer on abortion. So all of those issues hover.
You know, in the meantime, Jennifer, the Senate still needs to pass a bill to fund the government long term. What is holding that up right now?
You're right. In this situation, Republicans are upset that the Biden administration would fund a anti-drug program that they say would provide crack pipes. The Biden administration and the Department of Health and Human Services has pushed back really strongly, saying that this program would not do that. But it has certainly given Republicans something to talk about. They have really railed the last couple of days, saying that this Biden administration program would provide crack pipes. And that's what's holding up funding for the government right now. Republicans say they will not support a bill to fund the government unless this provision is removed. They are likely to demand a vote on the Senate floor on this issue. And, you know, as we've seen the last couple times that the Congress has tried to fund the government, Republicans really latch on to an issue that they feel like is going to resonate with voters and demand a vote demand attention on the issue before they allow funding for the government to continue. So the Senate has a couple days to figure this out, whether Democrats decide to give Republicans the vote, whether Republicans back down, yet to be determined. But they are inching closer and closer to that Friday deadline, and they don't have much time to spare.
Always seems to come down to the wire and sometimes even past the wire. Robert, we've all been so focused on what's going on overseas, but what are you hearing about the conversations over the president's next big decision, which is going to be his next Supreme Court nominee?
Well, some people that are close to President Biden are telling me privately today they still see Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson and the Supreme Court Justice in California, Justice Kruger, out there as the front runners, but don't rule out Judge Michelle Childs from South Carolina. She is someone who's close to House Majority Whip James Clyburn, and I have some new reporting where in recent days Clyburn has really been pitching the case for Childs. Judge Childs talking up her record with Republican senators, with Democratic senators, with allies inside of the administration. He says that ahead of the midterms, it wouldn't hurt Democrats, this is his case, to have someone who comes out of public universities, who comes out of the South, that in an election where former President Trump's not on the ballot, how do you get Democratic voters motivated to have Judge Childs on the tongues of people who are out there on the campaign trail, someone who comes from a public university? That's to Clyburn is something that would be a real positive for Democrats. But the Biden White House is weighing a lot of factors, not just those as they make this decision.
Really interesting to hear about that, as there's been a lot of discussion, as we all know, about the future direction here of the Democratic Party. And Jennifer, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez gave a wide-ranging interview with The New Yorker where she took aim at members of her own party, including leadership. You wrote over the weekend about Democrats questioning leaders' strategies. What is the divide in the Democratic Party right now?
You know, Democrats in Washington are really confronting the reality right now that they only have a couple more months to deliver policy that could influence the outcome of the midterm elections. And, with it is their ability to enact Biden's agenda for the second 2 years of his presidency. They have very tight margins. We talked about this a lot. They don't have a lot of wiggle room when they're enacting big bills, and they haven't really figured out how to enact policy with it. So that has led to some consternation. As you mentioned, Congresswoman Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez made some comments about House leadership, struggling generationally. And I did some reporting with my colleague Eli Stokols over the weekend. A lot of frustration among Democrats, both in the House and the Senate, directed at the Senate Majority Leader, Charles Schumer, and the White House Chief of Staff, Ron Klain. They argue that during the Build Back Better process, of course, this was the Biden administration's major progressive bill, that they focused way too much attention on the far left, Bernie Sanders, trying to get a $6 trillion deal when it was clear that the moderates, namely Senator Joe Manchin from West Virginia, was never going to go along with such a big agreement. And that too much of the attention was focused on the progressives, Twitter, which is very progressive as well, in the attention that they can put on Congress, when really they should have spent more time in that middle to get the votes, to try to get something done, even if it wasn't as expansive as what some Democrats had really wanted. So, all these emotions are brewing right now in the wake of Build Back Better's defeat, and Democrats are trying to figure out how to pick up the pieces and try to get something enacted before the midterms.
Yeah, really tough to swing for the fences when you've got a 50-50 Senate. Robert Costa and Jennifer Haberkorn, thank you so much for joining us today.